Hello and welcome to Congressman Henry Cuellar's Capitol Report. Your voice from Washington for the 28th District of Texas.
Every day, taxpayers interact with the federal government on a regular basis, whether it's through the passport services, student loans through the direct loan program to pay for higher education.
Every month, we bring home to you the issues that matter the most. And now, here's your update from the nation's capital.
Hello and welcome to Congressman Henry Cuellar's Capitol Report. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the latest legislative updates from Washington. These will include the highway bill, border infrastructure, crude oil exports, the debt limit, the budget, trade, and finally the speaker's race. So should be a busy episode, but before we go any further, just wanted to introduce Congressman Henry Cuellar. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and I'm excited being here, and I think we're going to have a good conversation.
Yes, I think we will too. So, Congressman, I'd like to start by talking about the highway bill, since it was recently taken up by the U.S. House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. You've been heavily invested in improving highways and transportation in your district. Can you tell us what your role has been and why it's so important to you in your district?
First of all, the highway bill is one that we used to authorize every 5-6 years. Now, lately, it's been on a, do it for 3 months, do it for 6 months, and I think all of that is wrong. We need to have stability, predictability to have a long-term highway bill. The highway bill is very important for Texas because if you look at the population, Texas grew by 4.3 million individuals the last census that we had. So Texas is growing very fast, and in order to keep up with this fast growth population, we need more money for highways, for our bridges, and certainly if we do our job in Washington, we get people in a bipartisan, we will be able to have a highway bill, bring dollars down here so we can have those jobs and construction and other places dealing with highways.
Can you explain how that committee review process will work?
Yes. The committee will go through a markup process, which means that they basically look at the bill, add amendments, defeat amendments, depending what they want to do, and then it will come up for the House vote sometime. Once we vote on that, then it will be sent over to the Senate. Keep in mind the Senate already has a 6-year highway bill that they've done, but it's only funded for 3 years. We probably are going to do the same thing, probably as 6 years, funded for 3 years. The problem is that we need to fund it for all 6 years, number one. But the thing is, there are some members that just want to have new monies, but they don't want to look for those new monies. And how do you keep postponing that decision about finding new monies to do highways? I mean, it's one of those things that nobody likes to talk about, fees, taxes, all that, but highways are very important, and we just have to be very straightforward and find a way to pay for this, and then let's move forward on getting a highway bill soon.
Do you think there's an easy way to find that money?
There are different things to look at, but the problem is, there are some people that just don't want to look at any new revenues. Mm-hmm. They want to take it away from Medicare, they want to take it away from other places, and they just want to find the easy way. Keep in mind, Riley, that we're not sent up here to do the easy decisions. Mm-hmm. There are some tough decisions, and there's some tough decisions that we have to make that people probably won't like. But again, we're not sent here to do the easy things. There are some tough decisions, but we have to do what's in the best interest of the country, what's in the best interest of Texas, and for our local communities.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell us more about what's in the bill and what your priorities were with the bill?
Yeah. Well, let me just talk about priorities. One of the things I wanted to see was to have what we call the freight corridors, to make sure they cover places like I-35 and other places that, that carry the large 18-wheelers, the large cargo trucks. And, the way the administration had done their freight corridors right now, they have a preliminary plan. It doesn't even cover the largest inland port in the country, which is Laredo. For example, we handle 12,000 trailers a day. If you look at that, in one day goes from Laredo up 121 miles if you just stack all the 18-wheelers. In 1 month, they would go from Laredo, stack the trucks, all the way to La Paz in Bolivia. In 1 year, That was in 1 month. In 1 year, you stack those trucks, they would go around the world twice. So why is I-35 starting off at a port of entry like Laredo, not a freight corridor? So one of the things I asked for, and I think we're able to get it, is we expanded the miles, and now it will cover areas like Laredo, and it only makes sense.
Yeah.
And the other thing, you mentioned one more thing about priorities, sorry about that. The other thing is we also won infrastructure for the ports of entries. A lot of people pay attention to airport and seaports, and all that is important. But if you look at land ports handle about 80 to 88% of all the people coming into the U.S., all the goods coming into the U.S. come through land ports. But our emphasis are not on land ports at all. So what we are looking at is to make sure that we also have sufficient funding to do the infrastructure along the ports of entry, because that's what they start off with. So those are two priorities, other priorities, but those are the two main priorities that I'm looking at. We got one already. The other one, we're almost there, but we're hoping that when the final version of the highway bill, that we do have some border infrastructure funding.
Right. You recently introduced a bill to on-border infrastructure. So how does this work with the highway bill?
Well, we got the bill, but, basically we're looking at the language and make sure it's part of the highway bill. So, sometimes we file bills to get, the attention of other members on this, but basically that bill is really, it's not going to move, but that language will be added on the highway bill. The highway bill is the bill that's going to pass.
Yeah. So now let's shift gears and talk about the crude oil export ban. So recently, the House voted to repeal that ban. So can you explain what it is, some background about it, and why there was such a big push to repeal it?
Back in the 70s, when we had the Arab embargo, the U.S. reacted by putting this ban, saying any oil that we produce domestically will stay in the U.S. for consumption. At that time, it made sense because we were really not producing a lot. Before the prices of oil came down, we were actually, when you put oil and gas together, we were the #1 producer in the whole world. When you put gas and oil together. This ban is outdated because we now produce more domestically. We got new technology that allows us to get a lot more. So what we want to do is lift that ban where we can export oil, and just like we don't tell Apple, hey, you can't send your iPhones out of the country, or we don't tell the cattle raisers, hey, you can't sell agricultural or cattle outside the country, because 95% of all the producers or consumers are outside the U.S. And the same thing here. Now, there's a couple things. People say, well, if you do that, won't gasoline prices go up? Actually, study after study, and even the Obama administration, Department of Energy, says that actually prices will go down from 1 cent to maybe 14 cents. The different studies show that, because gasoline prices are determined by world supply, not by what we do here, but by the world supply. That's how gasoline prices are set. That was one question that brought up. The other question is, well, we still are importing some oil. And it's true, but keep in mind what we produce around the Eagle Ford area, the area between San Antonio and Laredo. That is what we call light sweet oil. What our refineries handle is the heavy crude oil, the heavy oil. So we have to bring that crude oil because that's what our U.S. refineries handle now. Now they're making some changes to handle the light sweet. So if we can't really use the light sweet here, or not, we can't use all of it, then we need to export it. Otherwise, we just have it here. Eventually, I think our refineries and our producers will find a balance between what's sweet and what's heavy, light sweet or heavy crude oil. So basically, bottom line is we're able to export. That means more jobs, and that's the bottom line is we're trying to create jobs. Right now in Texas we've lost thousands of jobs because the low prices, and we can't do anything with, even if we drill for more sweet oil, we can't do anything with it because we can't send it outside the U.S. It's why are we prohibiting ourselves as a country a capitalist country, why are we saying, oh, by the way, you can't do this, you can't sell oil out because we're the U.S.? I mean, it's just an outdated policy.
Mm-hmm. So what's next for the bill now that it's passed the House?
Well, you know, the Senate is looking at it. They passed it out of out of the committee before it gets on the House floor. I mean, the Senate floor. You know, we're hoping that we can get some Senate Democrats to add some language. You know, maybe it's wind taxes, or maybe it's a conservation fund. Let's add something so we can, and that's how we get things done. Let's get a compromise to make things work and get the oil ban that we have lifted.
Mm-hmm. Supporters of the bill have said that it could also enhance national security. Can you explain that?
Well, you know, two ways, national security and domestic policy. National security basically says that, you know, if we're able to produce more, then we have that independence. National security, also foreign policy, basically says that, you know, Russia and Iran are able to influence foreign policy by the gas or the oil that they can sell. Why can the U.S. not also do that? Why are we limited? Why are we allowing Russia and Iran to be able to dictate some of the foreign policy through what we call soft power? Not the military, hard power, but soft power by using energy as a tool.
What concerns have you heard about lifting the ban in your district?
Well, it's basically the gasoline prices, but that's determined by world supply, not by what we do. And the other thing is, well, why are we still importing some oil? But remember, it's what type of oil? The refineries are just handling what they can right now of the heavy oil. They're constructed to handle heavy oil. The new production that we have is light sweet oil, what we call light oil. So the refineries can't handle that. So we got all this light oil that we can't do anything with it. So again, why are we as a country restricting ourselves? Imagine if Russia would do the same thing to themselves, where they couldn't use energy as a foreign policy tool. It would be crazy. They're not crazy. So why are we doing this to ourselves? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, can you talk also a little bit about the recently approved crude oil swap with Mexico? Because I know that has a little bit to do with this.
Yeah, you know, part of it is that it was an exemption that we were trying to find where we could get heavy crude oil and we would give them some sweet oil. We're doing light sweet. We're doing that with Canada, and my question is always if we do that with the Canadians, why can we not do this with the Mexicans who are just here on our southern border? That was something that I and some of the folks pushed for. We got it done. Now let's see where they are with the actual swaps on that. Because again, why is it? It's the same thing, swapping heavy oil for light sweet oil. We have light sweet oil. They have heavy. We need heavy for our refineries here.
Right. Do you have an update on the crude oil swap?
Yeah, it's been done. We're going to follow up to see where they are in the implementation. Hopefully, our federal government is moving as fast as hopefully I hope that they're doing.
So now let's switch gears and talk about something that's pressing coming up in a few weeks. We have the debt limit. That's going to need to be increased soon. So can you just tell us about the debt limit, what it is, how it differs from the budget, and what the problem is?
First, let's make sure we understand what the debt limit is, because some people think that if you lift the debt limit, you're going to increase spending. That's not true. Keep in mind that the spending decisions are done at the beginning. The debt limit is money that's been spent that you got to say, hey, this is what we owe, we got to pay for that. So we have to lift the debt limit because as a country, we cannot default. So we have reduced spending, and we're going to continue reducing spending. The discretionary funding, which is not, you have discretionary funding and mandatory. Mandatory funding is like Social Security, veterans benefits, the ones that we are in automatic. Those are increasing. The discretionary funding is everything else except for, including the military. That part has gone down, and we just got to make sure that as we reduce the discretionary funding, the mandatory spending is still going up, and therefore we still have a deficit and a debt that we cannot default on.
So something that people may have seen in the news is that the date that the Treasury Department has said we need to raise the debt limit by keeps changing. Can you explain that?
Well, you know, they're basically saying that we are going to reach in November a date that we have to not default because, you know, some of our Republican majority, they have a bill that says, well, why don't we pay certain things? And we call it pay China first before you do that. Bottom line is, you can't pay something and default in the other thing. You're in default. A bank, when you go to the bank, you know, the bank, you're not going to say, hey, look, I'm going to pay this, but I'm not going to pay this, banker. I mean, you got to pay the whole thing. I mean, that's what a obligation is. Again, this does not increase spending. It just, remember, the spending is done at the beginning, and we've done the reduction. This is the debt. It's already spent. It's already done. We cannot default on the obligations that we owe right now. It's like going to a bank and say, hey, bank, you know, I owe you $5,000, but, you know, I'm going to change the terms. I mean, you don't, the United States is not going to change the terms with its, you know, whoever has lent them money. You just don't do that. It's got to be both parties together. So I feel very confident that we're going to raise the debt limit. We're going to continue working on decreasing spending like we've done. We've done a good job, but remember, it's the mandatory spending that has gone up. So, you know, all those folks that are saying cut spending, well, if we cut veterans benefits, we know what the veterans are going to say. If we cut Social Security and Medicare, we know what our seniors or disabled folks are going to say. So, I mean, again, like I said at the beginning, we're not sent up here to do the easy decisions. We have to make some tough decisions. And anytime you make some tough decisions, some people are happy and some people are not happy. But that's where we, you know, part of our, this is what we signed up, is to sometimes make some very tough decisions.
Yeah, so you mentioned reducing spending. So what would you say to people back home who are wondering, okay, well, once we're reducing spending, then when will we see the benefits of that? So when will we no longer have to find ourselves in situations like this where we just keep increasing the debt ceiling?
You know, let's look at the budget, the appropriations. I said in the appropriations bill, we do a $3.5 trillion appropriation bill. That includes everything. 2/3 of that is on automatics. All we do out of the $3.5+ trillion, we only deal with $1.1 trillion. That's what we do in the appropriations. The other 3.5 minus 1.1, the 2.5 trillion is on automatic. We're only working on this. We've reduced the discretionary funding. The automatics, what I call the automatics, the entitlements or earned, whatever you want to call them, the Social Security, the Medicare, the veterans benefits, all that is increasing. So even if we reduce and get rid of all the discretionary funding, and you put it next to whatever money comes in, if we would get rid of all the discretionary funding, which is, you know, military, education, healthcare, you know, except for those mandatory, and just match it with the revenues coming in, my job would be a lot easier because I would only be dealing with Medicare, Social Security, and those type of benefits, and I couldn't provide any other funding. So again, it's you know, we have to look at, even though the deficit has come down, we still have to look at that there's less money coming in than money going out, bottom line. And eventually, and I say this very, very respectful to everybody, everybody says cut spending, but we haven't cut the spending on the mandatory spending, the automatics. The Social Security, the Medicare, the veterans benefits, all that has increased. All that has increased.
Yeah, so let's talk about trade. Of course, a deal was finally reached recently on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So can you explain what that is? It's been a long time in the making. So can you just explain how it got from start to finish and what sorts of things are in it?
You know, well, first of all, we don't know exactly everything's in it until we read it, and that should come out pretty soon. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is the U.S., Mexico, Canada, Japan. It's about 12 countries that handle about 40% of the world output. I mean, it's the largest agreement that we've seen that the U.S. has been involved in. It's basically the purpose of those agreements are to reduce tariffs, lower non-tariff barriers so there can be more trade between countries itself. For the state of Texas, there's about 18,000 plus tax cuts, if I can say that. Those are tariffs on Texas goods that will be reduced. If Texas tries to send something to Japan or Malaysia or Vietnam, there's usually 25-30% tariffs on it. So we're at a disadvantage. And a lot of times those countries can send their goods to the U.S. tariff-free because of our ideology here. So what we're trying to do is reduce tariffs, non-tariff barriers, so we can have more trade. 95% of our buyers are outside the U.S. So if we want to grow our economy, if we want to get our agriculture, our computers, our automobile dealers, whatever it is, if we're going to sell more and create more jobs by exporting, then we need to have a level playing field. Quite honestly, some people say, well, what you're seeing at, Mr. Cuellar, is you're giving the big corporations a giveaway. Those folks don't understand, without due respect, the makeup of who's involved in trade. Do you have the big companies involved? Of course you do. But usually 87 to 93% of the companies involved in international trade are medium and small companies. I emphasize, medium to small companies, 87 to 93%, maybe even higher than that, are involved. So actually this is going to help the small companies in the sanitary area, the Laredo, the Valley, in the rural areas. Those are the ones who are going to benefit by doing this trade agreement. There's going to be a lot of controversy. There's going to be a lot of things that are not true. My position is I will read the TPP once the text becomes available. I'll make a decision. And then if everything's good, I'll support it. Will it be 100% to the liking of everybody? Of course not. But remember, you had all these 12 countries that got together and they negotiated. But the bottom line is we're lowering tariffs. We're lowering tariffs so we can sell our goods there. Usually the U.S., Riley, is we allow goods coming into the U.S. duty-free. But when we send our goods to those countries, it's not. So when, all respect to my union friends, when they say they take jobs away, that's not very accurate. It's not very accurate, with all due respect, because those countries are already sending their goods into the U.S. duty-free. They're doing that already. But when we're able to send our goods over because their tariffs have gone down, that creates more jobs in the U.S.
You were recently back in the district for a district work period. What did you hear from your constituents about the TPP during that time?
Well, they're interested in trade, but they're also interested in infrastructure for trade because, for example, the Valley trade is going up, in Laredo growing by almost 10% every year. And so when you have trade coming up, they're saying, hey, this is good. It's creating jobs, but how do we handle the infrastructure? How do you move, how do you keep the movement of goods in a very efficient, effective way? You need infrastructure, you need more personnel, the men and women in blue. You need those equipment and infrastructure and technology and personnel to do that. That's what I hear from my constituents.
Great. So I guess finally I was hoping we could talk about the speaker's race and things just going on generally in the leadership here. So, just in the past few days we've heard that Paul Ryan might be putting himself up for speaker. So what do you know about that? What can you tell your constituents about what's going on with that race?
Well, my prediction, by the time the folks in the district see us here, Paul Ryan will be the speaker. That's my prediction. I know Paul Ryan. I used to do the P90 workout with him early in the morning, but that was too early. He's still doing that. He's a good man, and he believes in immigration reform. He is, for example, he's working something out on the revenues for the highway bill. So I think he wants to see things move because I think he also understands that the American public is just so frustrated with Congress in the sense that things can't be done. And you can even include me in that group that's frustrated with Congress because we got to get things done. And the way you get things done, you got to do it in a bipartisan way. This thing, there's no Republican way of doing things or Democratic way of doing things. It's the Congress doing things. Right. We work a deal out on the highway bill. It's Congress. It's not the Republicans. It's the Congress doing something. If we're going to do something on trade, it's the Congress, not the Republicans or the Democrats. We might have differences, and it's okay to have differences. But you don't say it's my way or my highway or the highway. I mean, there's some people that, quite honestly, there's in the Republican caucus, for example, they have the largest caucus they've had, a Republican majority since 1923. But they're stuck almost in a chaos, and they can't get things done because there's a small group of, I think they call themselves a Freedom Caucus, Freedom House Caucus, and they, basically sometimes rather stop the government. They feel that government shutdown is okay. They feel that nothing's going to happen if we default. And the Republican caucus, even though they have the largest majority, can't get things done. That's what happened to Boehner. I mean, Boehner's another good man. He was trying to do the right thing, but this caucus felt that he was giving in too fast or too quickly to the Democrats. Well, like I said, it's not a Republican Congress. It's a U.S. Congress made up of Democrats and Republicans, and that's what what we're trying to do is, and that's why I'm hoping that Paul Ryan will be able to work with us Democrats on things. Our Constitution was built on consensus, compromise. Our country was built on compromise, and we can do the same thing nowadays, modern times in the U.S. Congress. So that's what, those are the things we need to look at. So my prediction, Paul Ryan will be the new speaker. I just hope that the Freedom Caucus, the Tea Party guys, give him the little flexibility so he can do the job that he's going to probably be as a speaker, and that's to do what's right for the American public.
All right, great. Well, that's all the time we have today, but thank you so much for your time, Congressman.
Thank you so much.
Your constituents will really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.